Hi guys, welcome to my watercolour YouTube channel. I'm Karen Rice. This is going to be a step-by-step tutorial suitable for beginners. It's got lots of fun techniques and I hope it inspires you to paint something similar or even paint along. So shall we get started? I'm going to use this painting I painted a couple of years ago as a source of inspiration. And just to take the pressure off, I've decided to paint 3 semi-abstract paintings. So I'm dividing up my 9x12 piece of hot pressed watercolour paper into 3 separate paintings using washi tape. The paper is 300 grams. So it's quite nice actually to use the same subject and explore different ways of painting it. So I'm using some wax resist here to sort of really to reserve some light in my paintings. I won't be using any masking fluid, and in some areas I'm pressing quite hard. Now you don't have to use wax resist, but I quite like using it because already you're kind of pushing the boundaries there and sort of creating without even painting a mark. So I'm wetting all of the paintings in the top part. I'm going to paint the skies first. I'm using a flat 1-inch brush to do that. I've actually taped my paper to a Greyboard, a thick Greyboard. It's actually the back of an old watercolour block that I had. Now you don't need to use the colours that I'm using, but here I'm using Ultramarine, some Teal, Cobalt Teal, and a touch of Paynes grey, just to make a sort of a greyish blue, and I'm painting that with my size 10 brush, wet into wet, or kind of damp into wet. The paper is actually dried off a little bit. The weather has been very hot here in the UK and it is July 2022. So I'm spritzing here and tilting. I love to tilt and spritz because you get all these happy accidents, and what I really like about this technique is you're not actually touching the paint, you're just letting the water spritz on there, and I find that you get some amazing atmospheric effects doing this, and really tilt to the extreme as well, and then wipe off any excess afterwards with a paper towel, and already you've got something going there. I'm using my plastic card, and I will put a link in the description below all about using a plastic card, and it's just an ordinary store card. I've dipped it into some ultramarine there and a touch of Moonglow. You don't have to use these colours, as I said. You can use your own colours that inspire you. I like to paint the seascape because I love the sort of atmospheric skies, the water, rocks and the distant land. So this paint is straight from the tube, and I'm literally sort of carving out these distant rocks and mountains and hills, etc. So this left-hand painting, I've mixed up a dark grey sky, painting damp into damp. So already now I'm starting to change this painting to the left, adding water there, pushing it up into that damp paint. I've actually mixed up some creamy ultramarine with some Paynes grey, painting that paint damp into damp at the top there with my size 10 brush. A little bit more of that Paynes grey and ultramarine to create some clouds in the middle of the sky. And you notice I'm really tilting there, getting everything to run down, and painting some of that dark in that distant land there as well, damp into damp. This is a little bit of turquoise, and I'm painting this sort of damp into damp. And when I say damp, the brush isn't loaded with paint and the paper surface isn't saturated with water, so it's damp. So I'm just sort of painting that turquoisey colour there, just bringing it down sort of to the bottom half of the painting there. This is actually a colour called French Ochre, but you can use Quinacridone Gold or raw Sienna or even yellow ochre, and it's kind of like the sort of foreground that I've got in my previous painting, top right. It could be a sandy beach, it could be the start of some backgrounds for rocks. I'm not quite sure at the moment. I just love to experiment. I've just dropped a little bit of orange in there as well. You can actually just use some red with that yellow colour. Going back in now with my plastic card, with heavily loaded with some burnt umber and ultramarine to create a really dark brown colour. So this is a little bit of Brusho. You don't have to use Brusho. You can use some salt here, or watercolour pencil scraped with sandpaper, or even just spatter. But it's a grey Brusho, then it creates some texture. And now I am going to spatter. I'm spattering a little bit of burnt sienna. You can use some orange here as well, whatever you fancy. So I'm wetting the sea area here in my middle painting with my flat 1-inch brush. And I'm also sort of spattering as well some water. So I'm actually going to create some puddles here, again experimenting, so lots of just puddles of water. So now I'm going to spatter some of the turquoise paint. You can use phthalo blue or Prussian blue, but I just love the way the paint travels there. What I've decided to do here is go a little bit higher now on the right hand side, just using some black there with my size 8 brush. And I'm going to use some Rose of Ultramarine. You can use any pink. It had actually dried a little bit, so I had to push this bottom of this brush into the tube, and I got out some paint there. I thought, well, waste not, want not. So I actually painted with it. Hadn't actually planned on that. And I'm just drizzling that Rose of Ultramarine into the top part there. And now using my plastic card, using some ultramarine here, a little bit of Paynes grey, touch of burnt sienna, and just sort of modelling these rocks here. just sprinkling some sea salt there onto the damp surface there. Hopefully that will absorb some of the paint to create some light textures. So on this third painting, I'm actually spritzing the sea area, and again using the end of my paintbrush with that rose of ultramarine, working sort of damp into wet paint there. You can use any sort of pink as well, or a pink mixed with some blue, and in this instance I've used some of the turquoise there, and just working my way down there, tilting all the time to get the paint running, just adding some darks there, thick darks, just showing you a close-up there, sort of twirling my brush as well, really just experimenting and sort of using the brush, scribbling with my brush there, just making marks, sort of scoring the paper. So when you do this, it can be permanent as well. If you scratch the surface of the paper, the paint runs into that line to create a dark line. And now I'm actually adding a little bit of that French ochre, but you could use Quinacridone gold or raw sienna. I've decided to actually kind of draw with the corner of the card here. Instead of doing what I did earlier with the other two paintings, I'm actually drawing with the corner of the card some rocks there, outlines of rocks. I thought that was quite interesting. I'm going to use some light brown Brusho and sprinkle that onto the damp surface. Again, you can spatter this or use watercolour pencils with sandpaper. This is a very dilute rose of ultramarine, and I'm just, as you can see there, using my flat 1-inch brush and just sort of glazing it over the foreground area just to kind of push that light back a bit. It was quite distracting for me anyway. So I'm just adding a pinch of black now. I like black with pink. Even this rose of ultramarine is very pinky sort of colour, and it's quite nice. They go quite well together. So I'm brushing off the salt in this centre one. It didn't really work well, and I think I put it on a little bit too late. So not to worry. What I'm going to do now is just sort of work on the darks here on this left-hand painting using my size 10 brush, and I've just got a little bit of black there just to darken things up to kind of create a little bit more interest in the distance here. What I'm doing here is I am using my Stanley knife to scratch off some dried paint. It's a technique called scravito, and you are actually sort of scraping off a surface of paint there. So I'm actually doing that on all the paintings now. Make sure your paper is dry, otherwise you could actually scratch a hole. You don't have to do this. You could actually use some white paint to do this. So it creates a little bit of sparkle, and I quite like the effect, but I would definitely say less is more when you use this technique. It can get a bit carried away, and I have in the past. So this is some white gouache. You can use white watercolour paint, and I'm just spattering this now onto the dried surface using my size 6 brush. I'm just diluting the paint a little bit there as well. One of the things I love about spattering, besides that it creates textures and light and colour, is that it stops me from overworking my paintings. It's almost, I'm telling myself it's the end now. I'm not going to do too much more. Just where I got a few spatters where I didn't like them, I'm just sort of softening them with a clean damp brush. If you don't want your spatters to go anywhere, places that you don't want them to go to, just make sure you cover up those areas and any sort of valuable items in your house as well. So here are the finished paintings. I've removed the washi tape and I'm really pleased with them. They're all a little bit different from each other, especially the painting on the end. And I really hope it inspires you to sort of be creative, more experimental in your watercolour paintings. So I really hope you enjoyed that tutorial and all the yummy techniques. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.